Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. Julie Ralston owned a successful and thriving natural pet store for over 15 years where she helped people guide their pets towards healthier lives. Expanding on this passion towards humans, Julie began exploring human health and wellness. She is dedicated to helping real women make solid choices that bring more vibrance and fun to their lives. She's a Primal Health Coach, a certified Primal Play Instructor, has studied extensively with the Institute of Psychology of Eating, and she closely works with clients to address the what, why, and how of their eating habits and to help them attain their health and weight loss goals. Julie has had her own journey through health and wellness, and I actually met her along the journey, and together we have started an amazing company called Primal Health. But today we're actually interviewing me, I think. Julie's going to ask me, I guess, all sorts of questions, which she has sent me, but I haven't read. We're going to just delve a bit deeper into why I'm doing what I'm doing and where that all comes from. And I don't know what my answers are, so it could be an interesting interview. So, Julie, welcome.
Thanks. So, yeah, this is quite the interesting duo that we are, because you're Miss Spontaneity and I am Little Miss Planner. Have to have everything scripted and controlled. And so, yeah, we're going to wing this thing today. So I, as you said, we met at Paleo FX last year. We were doing a Chris Kresser workshop, and we got paired up and went through some role play as far as coaching. And I was like, I left that class that day, that workshop. I was like, well, that was a spunky, I don't know if I've ever admitted this to you. I was like, that was a spunky little British woman. And then we started talking. And finally, after like a month, my 13-year-old said to me, she heard us on speakerphone and she said, Mom, she's from Australia. Really? You can't hear that in her voice? I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. So, that's kind of how we met. And after working with you for the past couple months here, I'm so eager to be able to have the chance to interview you and kind of find out the inside scoop of why you're up to, what you're up to. So I want to start off a little bit about where you're from, because obviously, I couldn't even tell at first. I don't know why. Apparently my ears were clogged for the first month that we knew each other. But tell us a little bit about where you're from, where you've lived, and where you are now.
Yes, so I'm not from England. I'm from Australia. Grew up in a place called Canberra, which is actually the capital of Australia. Most people don't know. And from there, took a journey to Sydney as soon as I could get out of Canberra. And then my sort of journey took me to Japan. From there, back and forth to Sydney and Brisbane. And then Japan was in all about 6 years. And then for the last 4 years, I've been in Hong Kong and now in New York. So came to New York in January with my husband and now 5-year-old daughter.
So Australia, Hong Kong, Japan, New York. What's your favorite? What do you like most? And I guess if you had to move someplace, would you move back to any place now, or would you want to try something new?
It's funny you ask that because I like change, and so I'm always like exploring new places. So I don't know where my favorite is, but I do know I love the sun, and I love beaches and I love mountains. So I guess Australia would probably be my preferred option. But right now I'm just enjoying the journey, and I actually came to realize the other day that it's not about where you live. It's about who you're around. And I've got my family close by, as in my immediate family. And no matter where I go, I have friends close by. And so to me, it doesn't really, at the end of the day, matter where you are. In saying that, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm in New York. I'm not a city girl. It's not my ideal destination, but I feel if I can be happy there, then I can be happy anywhere.
Yeah, that is true. Because when you're not a city girl, New York's kind of a tough place to be. It's not exactly sunshine capital of the states here. So I have been really, really, really intrigued as far as just what a day in the life looks like for you. And maybe a day in the life isn't quite the right question. Maybe because I have a feeling you're kind of more of a broad picture, a big picture kind of person. What's, not just a day in the life, but like, what's a week in the life? Like how much, and for those of you who may not know Ali, I'm assuming if you're listening to this podcast, you know who she is and you've perhaps seen a picture, but, like I've got this vision of like how much you train and what you do and how much you eat and what you eat and, just all the things that health coaches and health people and wellness people think about. But like, what does a day or the week look like for you? Like how much when do you train? What do you do? What time do you wake up? And are you a morning person, night person? And what do you do for fun? I actually, I was surprised to hear, not surprised, but I was like, you told me that you were into comedies, like going to comedy shows. Like, is that what you do for fun? How do you relax? So yeah, just what's a day or the week in the life of Ali look like?
Yeah, so I absolutely love comedy and I'm excited this month because it's Comedy Festival, albeit before I leave the house, it already cost me $200 in babysitting fees, but it's well worth it. I just saw Jim Jeffries on the weekend and was very excited. But in answer to your question, what does a day look like? Actually, I like to have different days and surprises and great conversations and great meetings with people. And so for me, it's all about who did I meet today? What sort of conversations did I have? And that's sort of how I guess, judge whether my day was good or not. And it always ends up being good because even if I don't meet many new people that day or have great conversations, I always end up with my family having that sort of conversation or game or whatever it is at the end of the day. So I haven't answered your question. And I guess there's a few things, though, that I like to keep very stable in my life. And that is sleep. Sleep is something that has changed a lot for me over the years. I used to think it was really cool not to sleep. And I also believe that I didn't need much sleep. And so since doing the podcast, I've actually changed my habit around sleep. And I actually don't do anything unless I've got at least 7 hours, but I try for 8 hours of sleep every day. And it's pretty easy to do that because I just make sure that I go to bed at a reasonable time because I like getting up early. I used to wake up at like 3:30, and I've pushed it back now to sort of 5:30. And that works really well for me, especially because I like to stay up a bit later and watch comedy and just chill out with my husband. So in terms of exercise, that also varies a lot and has changed a lot depending on where I'm living and how I sort of feel. So I actually track my HRV, heart rate variability. I used to use, and I still do use, the Elite app, and I also now use the OURA ring. So I have two different ways of measuring my readiness score, which is, I guess, a score that tells you how ready you are to train. And albeit I do listen to my body because sometimes it's not quite accurate. So it takes into consideration the exercise you've done. It takes into consideration your temperature overnight, your sleep patterns, and it gives you a score. But I find that I'm actually the best doctor of my body, and so I know whether I'm ready or not. But I do like to use it as a tool just to keep me on track. So if I'm not well slept or if I'm not feeling great, then I definitely won't do an intense exercise session. In saying that, I actually rarely do very intense exercise. I normally do what you would call like a HIIT sort of thing, maybe twice a week maximum. I'm not a big fan of HIIT. And in terms of what training I do, So that's changed a lot over the years. I don't know whether we're going to go into this, but I used to do a lot of running, excessive running and that sort of thing many years ago. And now my training, I sort of got into riding, but now my training is actually around a lot more sort of, I guess, resistance, gymnastics style, awareness, conscious training, I like to say. So it's really all about how my body feels and then making sure that I have a really good balance of mobility and strength.
Yeah, because you're involved in a gymnastics gym in New York City, right? Because you've not always been a gymnast, correct? Like this is kind of new for you, or?
Yeah, actually, I only started this in March. In saying that, though, it really resonates with me, that type of movement, that mobility and strength. I'm definitely not what I would call a gymnast. And I guess it's all about who you compare yourself to. And, you know, the coaches at the gymnastics studio are all very, very, very much gymnasts. So, but I guess in answer to your question about exercise, I like to be CrossFit. So I like to be able to really do anything. So I love doing like a kettlebell session once a week, you know, some rings once a week, handstands once a week, and then throw in a bit of cycling, albeit it's very hard to cycle in New York because for me it's a bit cold. So I think cycling's sort of gone a bit out the window since I've been here.
Bummer. I know, because that I know. I've gathered that is probably one of your big passions. So that's kind of a rough patch. Now, what about food? And I think this, you know, coming from the angle that like we're primal health coaches, we're trained in ancestral health, and you know, primal is always linked so heavily with eating meat and paleo. And I remember we were talking one time, and you're like, "Oh, I hardly ever eat meat. I don't really like even the taste of it. I like seafood." Or so. What do you eat?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually haven't eaten meat since I was, I don't know. I mean, at least 18, at least like since I haven't lived at home. I don't know exactly why, but I think it's because as a kid, we used to have like lamb chops and sausages, and they were just sort of disgusting. And I just got really turned off meat. And it's one of those things now where I feel like it just isn't right for my body. I love fish. I love seafood. And I just don't feel like I even, you know, really want to eat it. In fact, I really don't. And same with chicken. I love fish, and I love vegetables. I tend to sort of like healthy type foods because they make me feel good. And being into fitness, it was always about, well, what do I need to eat to make me perform better or to feel better? And so that's sort of, I guess, why I like to eat fairly what most people would call healthy, I guess.
Right. So no sweet tooth, huh?
Oh, I wouldn't say that. In fact, I actually wondered whether I was going to be a diabetic at one stage. I was in that chronic cardio stage where people just rely on sugar. This was many years ago, but the amount of sugar that I consumed was unbelievable. And I literally do not know how I'm not a diabetic now.
Wow. Yeah, that's it's a path that a lot of us go down, especially as women, getting into that chronic cardio. You've got to work out more and fuel more, and that's kind of what we've been told forever, isn't it? Like you need your carbs and you need your sugars, and yeah, it's amazing we're not all diabetics at this point.
But I do eat a fair bit of carbs. I know there's a lot of like sort of people with different viewpoints on this, and as you know, at Primal Health, we're all about individualizing diet to serve the person, and everyone is very different. But for myself, I actually need carbs. I find that I just don't have enough energy. I can't perform very well, and I can't afford to lose too much weight either. So it's just a really nice balance for me to eat a good balance of the macronutrients. So I find that if I was to, I've never measured my food and never been into it, but if I was to, I would probably find that it's a very, I guess, equal amount of macronutrients across the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that you're right. Like, everybody is so individual, and, we really strive to not be dogmatic about any kind of diet or any kind of lifestyle choices. But I will say it, like, I think just the general consensus for women is, a lot of us need more carbs than our keto loving brothers who tend to do really, really well on it for longer periods of time.
Yeah, I mean, in saying that, I guess longer periods of time haven't really been seen yet, so it'll be interesting to see. But I do also think that it's very individual, and it also is very dependent on what type of carbs you eat. I personally, I don't eat grains. I find that they're very inflammatory, and so I don't eat gluten. I'm sensitive to gluten, as I think most of the population actually is. And so I think for that reason, most of my carbs are made up of vegetables and what I would refer to as fairly healthy carbs.
Right. Yay. Because yes, I'm definitely the opposite. I've got that sweet tooth, and if I could have all my carbs in the form of sugar and even grain-free chips, it's it's a challenge.
But also, in saying that, I'm a very boring eater.
Are you?
I can have the same dinner every night if I had a salmon steak or a couple, because I tend to eat a lot, and I do like a lot of salmon steaks. But if I could have a couple of salmon steaks and a plate of vegetables, I would be happy.
Awesome. So I want to go back a little bit because you're a personal trainer and a coach and entrepreneur, but like, when did this, have you always been a trainer? Because that wasn't your past life, was it? I mean, you came out of corporate, I want to say corporate America, but you're not American. But what were you before this? And what was the change? How did that, did you become a yoga instructor first, or a primal health coach, or a personal trainer? Kind of how did that all come about?
Yeah, so I guess I've always enjoyed sports. My mum was actually a pretty good cricket player, and growing up with two brothers, I tended to play soccer and just whatever sport they played, I played. And so I've always had a passion for sports and fitness and health. And so I was sort of doing little courses here and there. I ended up, long story short, after Japan, did an honours degree in linguistics and Japanese, came back, wanted to make money, got into the bank, and started off as a home loan lender, moved through the ranks, branch manager, business development manager, all sorts of different things, and woke up one day thinking, I just can't do this anymore. In the meantime, though, like over those 5 or 6 years, I'd done several different teacher training courses in yoga, and certified myself in several different things. So I knew that was the next path when I left. I left, and then I did my certification in personal training.
Got it. So so how old were you when you were in the banking industry? Was that in your 20s, early 30s, or how long have you been out of it? Yeah,
so pretty much 20s and early 30s, probably the last 8 years, full time.
It's interesting. There seem to be quite a few ex-bank people in in the primal or wellness world in general. I think I think it's an industry that fries you out pretty quickly, huh?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I want to get just a little bit personal here and ask you to share a little bit about your background, especially as a teen. Because, so with Primal Health, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about this, this new endeavor of yours and ours, but, it's all about women and it's all about how we grew up and how our past affects us now and our relationship with food and our relationships with our body and exercise and food. And it's not all about the food. And you told me a little bit about yourself as a teenager, because you mentioned that you've always been kind of athletic and your mom was the cricket player. But you haven't always been, like you're this spunky little firebomb and, and you're ripped. I mean, I'll just be honest, like you're shredded. But that hasn't always been your identity or that hasn't always been you, has it? Like your teenage years were different.
Yeah, it's funny because you asked me a similar question not long ago, and no one's actually ever asked me the question, and I've never really thought about why Primal Health. Why do I even care about women, and why do I want to help women get fit and healthy and strong? And I looked back on my life and realized why. And I've got you to thank for that, because I haven't even told you the story. In fact, I've never told anyone the story. So here goes. I'll tell you. So I'm not really sure if I'm going to answer your question straight out, but I went to school and loved hanging out with boys and was very much a tomboy. I had brothers and what have you. And then in my later years of primary school, which I think you might call elementary school, so sort of year 5 and 6, things started to change for me. I never really cared about my body and that sort of thing, and was never really interested in guys until about year 4, I started, getting boyfriends and what have you. And then in year 5 and 6, I actually had some fairly bad experiences, some sexual experiences that were not by choice. And there was a lot of, peer pressure involved. And it's something that I've actually never discussed. I feel like I've very much come to terms with it, but I've never really thought about how that actually affected where I am now. And it's funny, when I look back, I see what that actually did to me. So from that time, I took control of my body and my weight, and I made sure that I was not, favorable to the opposite sex, so that they wouldn't see me as being someone that they'd like to be with. Right. And I obviously subconsciously did this as a way to protect myself and to build that identity, I guess. So for that reason, perhaps had a lot of male friends and a lot of female friends, but I was very much definitely a friend to everyone rather than being a girlfriend. I mean, I did have boyfriends, but it was definitely something that I almost deliberately made myself not attractive, and therefore body weight and all of these things just wasn't a priority for me. And I never really cared. And I was probably a bit overweight, if anything, and it just didn't bother me at all. In fact, it was my aim, I think. And this changed when I went to Japan. So in Japan, Japanese people are very upfront about your weight. So the first thing they'll say to you is, hello, oh, you're getting fat, or you're looking thin. That's sort of the first thing they'll say after a greeting, and that they don't even need to know you that well. That's just sort of, so you always know what your body looks like from your friends and family. So that was interesting to me. And then I lived with a host family over in Japan. So I actually ended up putting on a lot of weight in a short amount of time. And of course, for the first time, started to actually notice because it was pointed out to me every day.
Yeah.
But it still didn't bother me. And I think it was for that same reason that I wanted to protect myself and never be forced to do anything sexual that I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And so I guess what happened there was that I finally realized that actually I don't really want to be told I'm fat every day. It's not really that exciting. So funnily enough, at the same time, I decided to hitchhike around Japan for another 6 months. And I ran out of money. I actually had no money. And the only way that I could get food was by going into restaurants and grabbing some stuff off the tables that people had left behind. And so I actually lost weight. And it was funny because it wasn't a choice, but I'm like, oh, wow, this is cool. I'm actually getting some people are telling me that I'm getting thin now as opposed to you're getting fat all the time. And returning to my host family, they told me, oh, you're actually thin. You're losing weight. You look good. And that was my first sort of body image wake up call. And the first time that I even really cared about body image. And so long story short, I went back to Australia and being a type A sort of personality, I wanted to get more into running and that sort of thing. And it was also awesome because I could eat whatever I wanted and I would not put on weight. And being the type A personality, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. I'd run 10K and I'd be like, oh, that's pretty easy. Actually, I'll do 20 tomorrow. 20 is too easy. I'm going to do 30. So I would be doing like half marathons every day and thinking, oh, that's not enough. Like that's not much. I could do more than that. This is while I was at university. And the more I ran, the more I wanted to run. And before I knew it, I burnt out after sort of a couple of years of doing this. I didn't realize how bad, but one day when I couldn't get out of bed and for the next 6 months sort of had chronic fatigue, I realized that it was not so conducive to run.
Yeah. Little chronic overtraining did you in. And this affected you later. I mean, for years, didn't you? I mean, you battled some health issues, right? I mean, how'd you kind of heal yourself from it?
Yeah, well, so after the chronic fatigue, I realized that I had major IBS, but at the time, doctors didn't really know that much about it, or at least the ones I was seeing. And I went from doctor to doctor trying to work this out and just could not work it out. And clearly I had a form of anorexia aerobia, I think it's called, where you just don't eat enough to give yourself energy because you're using up too much energy with exercise. And so I definitely had an eating disorder, which was very obvious when I got a bone density exam and the doctor said, you've got osteopenia and probably the way you're going, by the time you're 40, you're going to have osteoporosis.
Wow. And
that was a bit of a wake-up call for me. But the biggest wake-up call for me was, I guess, when I decided, well, my husband also really wanted to have children. And I, up until that time, had controlled everything in my life. I'd bought houses at a young age. I'd invested. I'd made things happen. I found, not that I was looking, but the perfect husband, who still is the perfect husband after 16 years. And I felt like everything was in my control. And I really believed that I could control everything. And looking back at where that came from, I actually think it might have come from a very bad head injury. I haven't sort of mentioned this before, but when I was 9, I got hit in the head with a golf club, and it fractured my skull and put me in a coma for several months. And obviously people didn't know whether I'd come out of the coma or not. And for some reason, I think that made me quite strong and determined. I think that's where it came from. I think also my impatience may have come from that as well. So moving on, I really wanted to get pregnant and thought it was in my control to do this. And at the age of, I think it must have been about 30, I decided that, I was going to get pregnant. Little did I know that was not going to happen. At about 1% body fat, it's not going to happen.
Nope.
So went off the pill, thinking that I'll get pregnant. And long story short, I experienced IUI and IVF over the next 7 years, and on and off. But it was like, I guess the best way to explain it, apart from feeling like your bank account is running dry, it's like PMT times 100, I guess. You don't really want to talk to too many people because you might bite their head off.
Yeah.
And to be honest, looking back at it now, I'm surprised I don't have cancer. Maybe I should go and get tested. But it was a pretty rough stage of my life to go through that. And I guess during that time as well, I was dealing with the osteopenia. It took me several years to get over the IBS. And also, obviously, the psychology around exercise addiction. So at this stage, I realized that I was just addicted to running, like addicted to exercise. And I would say that in a way, I still am addicted in that I do love doing exercise and it does make me extremely happy. But I guess it's a different thing now. There are other things in my life that are more important. And I feel like I use exercise now to help rather than hinder my life. But I think I've only can say that I can do that because of my experiences. So my first experience was I need to get pregnant, and what do I need to do in order for that to happen? So I went to the doctor and I said, I want to do IVF. And the doctor's like, you're not doing it. You can't because you need more body fat. So you need to stop exercising for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So that was a big thing for me. And I took 2 years off exercise. But being the type A, I thought, I might just do a bit of yoga. Is yoga okay? And the doctor's like, yeah, you can do yoga. Little did he know that I was going to get into hardcore yoga.
Yeah.
And, of course, I went down that route and nothing was changing. So I backed off and did no exercise for 2 years, hardest 2 years of my life, and was annoyed because if anything, I probably lost weight because I probably lost more bone density. It wasn't a great recommendation from the doctor. So I then in between that time, saw a psychologist and went to the psychologist, a sports psychologist, and said, I just need you to convince me not to exercise. I don't care how you do it. I just want you to tell me not to exercise. So she went through different stuff, and I think I just convinced myself not to do it. But at the end of the day, it didn't really help anything. Long story short, I actually had to get my gallbladder taken out. It was a hereditary thing, and they thought that also had something to do with it. And I did start to put on a bit of weight after that as well. So that was good. And so it was a bit of a journey, and I'm not really sure what to say, but I think sometimes things happen for a reason, and that was just the journey that I had to put myself through. And I say that because at the end of the day, they were all my choices, and I put myself through it. And then when it comes to injuries, I've definitely had my fair share of those. Apart from that first one that I mentioned, I also had a double hip surgery, and I don't know whether that was sort of God or whoever you'd like to call it telling me to perhaps slow down and get into meditation, and it worked. And that was actually a structural problem, but I do believe it was because I pushed my body too hard.
Yeah.
And then just over a year and a half ago, I had a bad bicycle accident, tore 7 ligaments in my left shoulder and had some head damage. My helmet split open and had concussion for about 4 months. And I guess that repetitive head injury hasn't made me any smarter. Still fairly impatient, but feel like that was just another lesson to say reevaluate, slow down. And that was actually a really amazing wake-up call for me, because it made me so grateful for what I have, for friends and family. And it also said to me, wake up, do what you love, because you're not going to be around for long. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started the podcast. So I guess that hopefully explains your answer.
That's a lot. And, and it's funny because you probably, it's just part of who you are. And, as we get older as women, you kind of go, well, that's just who I am. And that's my history. And you don't really look at it as like, wow, that really had some major influence on why I chose to do this, or why I'm doing this now, or, anything from the exercise that you're doing to the binge eating that you may be doing. Like, I mean, it could just have, so much to do with your past. And you work as a trainer. You've worked with hundreds of women and men, but I'd like to, ask you a little bit, pick your brain about a little bit about the women that you've worked with. I'm guessing that there's some common threads in the struggles that you see with the women that you train, what they're struggling with, what they're striving for, and where it's led you from becoming kind of just all about exercise to now, this new project that you're working on of exercise and nutrition is part of it, but it's a whole bigger picture. What about the women that you train? Common threads. What are they struggling with, especially, kind of the 40 and 50-year-olds that are going through such life changes at this point?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I should point out too that, so it was only about 8 years ago that I actually started resistance training. And I'm happy to say that my DEXA scan, I get a DEXA scan every year. Every year it's improved, and I'm now totally above normal for my bones. And the doctor said there's no way that you're going to be able to change your osteopenia. The only thing you can do is not let it get worse. And I've actually improved it dramatically to the point where it's actually above average for my age. So I bring that up because a lot of women that I work with have osteopenia and they don't even know it. And they don't know the importance of resistance training. I see women on cardio machines and I have no issues with cardio. I think that there's a place for cardio, absolutely. But if I was to choose one type of training for a woman of that age, 40, 50, I would say if you've only got time for one thing, do resistance training, because your bones are so important. And so that's probably a huge thing. Another thing is hormones. And you and I both know that your hormones rule your life. Yep. So that if your hormones are not in balance, then it doesn't matter what you eat. You're going to put on weight or you're not going to put on weight. It's going to determine what happens. And through my journey, I've realized how that affects you and how easy it is to fix that. And so, like you said, it's not just about fitness. It's not just about exercise. It's not just about nutrition. Of course, they're all important. but there's so much more, and hormones are definitely one, which brings me to the next one, which, of course, you're an expert in psychology of eating studies, but psychology has so much to do with it. I mean, I gave you my example of where I subconsciously chose to be that identity. And actually, what's interesting is I even changed my name. So I used to refer to myself as Al when I was at school, Al as in AL.
Yeah.
And when I decided that that's not the identity I wanted anymore, and I've never even consciously thought about this, but I changed to Ali.
Wow.
So maybe that was
how interesting.
Maybe that was a technique that I used to help me change who I wanted to be.
Yeah.
So this is a little side note there, but so women I work with a lot often find that all of these factors are so important to take care of. So it's not just an hour that I spend with them training in the gym or outside or wherever we train, but it's so much more than that. And it needs to be addressed. And this is why Primal Health came about, because I feel like that a certain amount of people can resonate with me, can understand my story without me even telling them, and I can help these people. But it's all about your connection with people, and I believe that bringing on a group of experts like yourself and our other coaches who have a background in psychology of eating, who have a background in nutrition, who have their own journey. And this is the big thing, that all our health coaches like yourself have all journeys totally different to mine, but perhaps hellish as well. And so we've all been on these horrible journeys that we can now relate to all of these women if we put all our sort of knowledge and journeys together. And that's why I think you'll agree that Primal Health came about, because you and I and all the other coaches can't do it alone, but together with all our expertise. I mean, we have a hormone expert, FDN, who works with a board of doctors. So we've just got that community that we can really help anyone that is willing to I guess make the journey. And that's what it is. It's a journey. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I just absolutely love about, just being with a team of other women, I mean, from a client perspective, I mean, how fantastic is it to not just have one person who, like if you're working with a fitness trainer, they're going to look at your case with a fitness lens. Or if you're working with somebody who specializes in a certain, like everybody looks through things with a different lens. And so when you work with a team of people, you have all these different lenses to look at each individual case by case. And I mean, I just think it's fantastic. I mean, I know I've worked with so many people as a client, working with doctors and nutritionists and all kinds of things for my challenges. And, it's nice to be able to have a team of people looking and helping you from all different angles. And personally, it's just really fun working with a group of other women who are really awesome. So what's in store with Primal Health? What's going on with this? Where are we going? Because you're still podcasting. Ali Fitness is not going anywhere, right? Like the podcast is pretty fascinating.
Absolutely. Ali Fitness is not going anywhere. But I would love for any of our listeners and their partners to share their stories with us. Open up and share your journey, and let's look at it. Let's pull it apart and see if we can help. So if you want to send me personally an email, at Ali at Primal.Health, I would love to have a conversation with you and work out how we can help you, obviously like a free consult, whatever it is, because if we can stop the path that you're on, or let's say take a different turn, then we would love to be part of that. And like you said, Julie, I mean, I've helped many women and men in their journey, but I feel now with a team we can do so much more. We discuss people's cases and get advice from our head coaches, and it just makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know you have to run off to actually work with a group of women right now, but I know you usually end with a tattoo question. But I know you've already answered that before in a previous podcast. So I would love to know, just, is there something you're digging right now? Like, let's just have a little fun. Is there a product, whether it's food or a gadget or gizmo, or a favorite show that you're watching, or, just what are you digging right now?
Yeah. So do you know what I'm really enjoying is two things. One is Primal Health. We're running a movement month. So movement month is all of November. So if anyone's listening now, you can actually still sign up. Go to primal.health/ I don't know. What is it, Julie?
Move into health.
Move into health. So primal.health/ move into health, and sign up. And we're actually giving away awesome daily prizes. And it's really great to see just these little changes that people are making, because that's where it all starts. So come along, join up, and post your movement of the day. All the instructions are there. It's super easy. And hopefully we'll give away some prizes. So that's actually really great to see everyone like participating in that and making the small changes that are going to make the difference. And then in terms of gadgets and what have you, I'm not really a biohacker, because at the end of the day, like, it's so just sleep or just do this. But I do like to use techniques or gadgets that are going to help me do that. And I mentioned the OURA ring to you because that's something that I've actually found really helpful for me, because you've probably heard this saying, whatever you measure, I don't know what the actual saying is actually, but it's whatever you measure counts or something like that. And so up until now, I haven't actually been able to measure my sleep. So I can convince myself that it was good, or there's nothing to be accountable for. And now I'm accountable for my sleep because I want to get a good score.
Yeah.
And so
the competitive part of you.
Exactly. And so the OURA ring has enabled me to better my sleep. And that may not work for everyone, because one of my friends actually decides to take it off whenever he's going to have a big night out, and just doesn't track it. So that's always an option as well. But for me, it's been a real game changer, because it's a way that I can measure it and then prove to myself that, yes, I'm doing the best thing for my health, which I believe, number one, even before nutrition, is sleep. And on that note, accountability is such an important thing. And that's why Primal Health has also come about, because we want to help you be accountable. So that was, I think, a good note to end on, unless you've got any more questions.
Oh, I'm sure I will come up with many more, and I will bug you with them along the road. But thank you for opening up and sharing your journey, which, thank you. That was pretty awesome. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ali.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review, and subscribe.